Kierra Coles was a hardworking 27-year-old young woman in October of 2018. She was a woman with a plan. Kierra had worked hard to gain a permanent position as a postal carrier with the United States Postal Service. She had just moved to a new home in the Chicago area and had just bought herself a new car. Kierra had also planned on getting pregnant and having a baby as soon as she felt stable, and she had recently found out she was indeed pregnant. Kierra had been dating Josh Simmons, another postal employee, for a few years. The nature of their relationship was complicated, but Kierra was thrilled to be having a baby. On Wednesday, October 3rd, 2018, Kierra called in sick to work. Kierra would never be seen or heard from again. Where is Kierra Coles?
Tonight, Chicago police say they're still following up on tips and leads in Kierra Coles' disappearance. Her family says they're not giving up. Today marks yet another birthday Kierra Coles should have spent with her family.
We're not going to give up until she is found.
Coles went missing nearly 3 years ago.
When you go from seeing your child every day to not seeing her for almost 3 years, could nobody out here imagine.
The pregnant postal worker's disappearance still classified as a high-risk investigation. Chicago police suspect foul play.
That I think is very selfish that you could sit back and watch a family go through something like this and you know what happened to my daughter.
Coles was reportedly last seen near 81st and Vernon. The pregnant woman talked to her mom on the phone the night before. Coles was supposed to go to work that day, but never showed up. Investigators found her cell phone, purse, and car near her home on the city's south side.
And if you have a heart, I just wish you would just come forward and say something.
For years, this surveillance video recorded the day of the disappearance was considered a key piece of evidence. Kierra's family says that clip is not of their daughter, pushing Chicago police to get back to her case.
And the big evidence to me is who she was last seen with. But they say that's not enough to bring them in.
Each day that passes is more difficult, but Kierra's dad not giving up.
You're looking for answers, and no one's there to provide the answers for you.
Tonight, the reward for any information that leads to a break in this case sits at nearly $50,000 and counting. The family asking anyone that has information to give Chicago police a call.
The worker, she is 3 months pregnant and was last seen on surveillance, and tonight authorities suspect foul play. They're now asking for the public's help.
More than 2 weeks after 26-year-old postal worker Kierra Coles vanished without a trace, police now say they suspect she was the victim of foul play. She was last seen here near her home on a neighbor's surveillance video.
Postal worker who was pregnant when she disappeared.
A $45,000 reward is now being offered for information on a missing pregnant postal worker. Kierra Coles has not been seen since October of 2018.
Everything goes through your mind. What if it's this? What if it's that? What if this happened? What if that's happened? We just don't know. And to feel like your child could be harmed every day, that's torture to yourself. We miss her. We miss her mouth. We miss her personality. We just ready for her to come home.
It hurt every day that we ain't able to talk, see, speak, hug, play. Man, you don't know the things we're going through right now. I take it the hardest because I'm going through it the most.
Hello, and welcome back to the Where Are They podcast. The goal of our show is to spread awareness of unsolved missing persons cases and to give a voice to those that don't have one. This episode, we want to give two voices, one for the missing Kierra Coles and one for her unborn baby. Kierra was 3 months pregnant when she vanished, so essentially we have two missing persons in this case. And while investigating what may have happened to Kierra Coles and her unborn baby, it's pretty clear there's a lot of confusion in this case. And a lot of times we struggle with finding information at all, but what we have here is a lot of misinformation being spread around different media outlets. The case of Kierra Coles is a frustrating one. This is a case that did receive a small bit of media attention back in 2018 when Kierra first disappeared, but the few facts reported were mostly incorrect, and a lot of the media outlets continued to pick up incorrect information and repeatedly present that to the public. It was a frustrating case to dive into, but I still want to cover her story because Kierra Coles is still missing, as is her baby. And while it did seem to get a fair amount of coverage in the beginning, it has definitely fizzled out since then. So, who was Kierra Coles? Kierra Michelle Coles was born September 24th, 1991, to mom Karen Phillips and dad Joseph Coles. She was the fourth of 5 children and was very close to her family growing up in South Chicago. She was a beautiful girl who grew up determined to make a good life for herself. When she was 20 years old, she met and began dating Joshua Simmons, who worked for the United States Postal Service. They had a decent relationship most of the time, but did have some struggles along the way as they dealt with some infidelity from Josh and the fact that he had fathered other children with 2 other women. In 2017, she started working as a substitute or a fill-in for other postal carriers for the USPS, the United States Postal Service. When she was finally hired in at the USPS as a full-time mail carrier, Kierra was ecstatic. Kierra had worked her butt off to provide a stable life for herself and be successful. Besides her USPS job, Kierra also worked part-time as a Lyft driver in the city. In 2018, she moved to a new home also on the south side of Chicago, near the intersection of 81st Street and Vernon, to be more precise. She had also just bought herself a car and was excited to be living out her dream life. Kierra was 26 years old when she found out she was pregnant, but it was all going according to plan. She had told friends and family that once she was settled, she wanted to have a baby. The final step in her plan was to get hired in permanently at the post office, which she had just achieved. So the pregnancy was just the next step. Her and Josh had actually been talking about it for quite some time. However, around this same time, Kierra learned that Josh had yet again been unfaithful, and that this other woman was also pregnant. You could definitely say that their relationship was on the rocks at this point, but Kierra remained excited and upbeat about the baby. Her friends would say it was the fact that she was so happy about the baby that was helping her deal with yet another indiscretion from Josh. On September 24th, 2018, Kierra turned 27 years old. She was super excited to become a mom, and her baby's due date was announced as April 23rd, 2019. Kierra took a couple of vacation days on Monday, October 1st and Tuesday, October 2nd. According to Kierra's mom, these days were planned days off in advance as she just had some things to do. On Tuesday, October 2nd, Kierra hung out with a friend that day, leaving in the late afternoon because she had a WIC appointment for her baby. WIC is a program that helps mothers with baby formula and other healthy foods during pregnancy. On the way to the appointment, Kierra called her mom, and they had a conversation about baby formula. Karen remembers that Kierra seemed upbeat and happy during their conversation. The next day, Wednesday, October 3rd, Kierra was due to return to work. And on that day, Kierra's mom, Karen, tried to reach her a few times. Kierra was super close with her mom and talked to her almost every day. When Kierra wasn't answering the phone, Karen just figured her daughter must have been really busy at work that day and wasn't too alarmed when Kierra didn't answer. Keisha, Kierra's sister, also tried to reach her. By late afternoon, however, all of the calls to Kierra started going straight to voicemail. On Thursday, October 4th, Karen tried repeatedly to get a hold of Kierra once again, with no luck. Karen asked Keisha to check social media for any sign of activity from Kierra, and they found nothing. Kierra was an avid Snapchatter, and Snapchat was silent. As concern grew, members of Kierra's family went to her apartment to check on her, while her sister tried to contact her boyfriend, Josh. They found Kierra's apartment locked, but her car parked outside. Eventually, Karen called the Chicago Police Department and asked them to perform a welfare check. They did, and they reported that Kierra was not home, despite her car being parked right in front of the building. It was not long after this that a missing persons report was filed. And this was when they learned that Kierra had actually called in sick on Wednesday, October 3rd, although no one was quite sure why that was, especially since she had just taken 2 planned vacation days right before that. Right away, this case turns into a complete mess. Law enforcement asks some neighbors for surveillance footage, and they find a clip of Kierra leaving her home on the morning of October 3rd, dressed in what looked like her work uniform and acting as if she was just leaving for work as normal. The media picked up the story but reported so many things wrong. Many media outlets had her age wrong. Some said that she was last seen the morning of October 2nd, and some said October 3rd. The surveillance footage was showcased all over the news, but it was confusing to people. If Kierra had called in sick to work, why was she shown leaving her home in what the police said was her normal work attire that same morning? And the surveillance footage wasn't that clear to even see Kierra's face, or in my opinion, to even confirm that she was wearing a USPS uniform. Now, as the investigation picks up, the media starts to cover the story a little bit more. But all reports continue to be a mess with the facts in this story. Facts are continuously reported incorrectly and differently on different platforms, and no one knows quite what to think. The family is advised not to talk to media, and they don't want to hinder the investigation, so they do keep a little bit quiet. There would be reports that Kierra was last seen in the neighborhood of 81st Street and Coles Avenue, but others report her being last seen near her home, 81st and Vernon Avenue. And those intersections, if you look at Google Maps, are over 3 miles away from each other. Karen, Kierra's mother, reaches out to speak to the postal worker who took the call from Kierra that she was calling in sick. And this postal worker, this coworker, was certain that it was Kierra on the phone, but really couldn't say any more than that. And it's not even confirmed if that call came in the morning of the 3rd or the evening of the 2nd. The police do access Kierra's car finally, and inside her car, they find her purse and her cell phone. But what is missing is her wallet and her keys. Family was also trying to reach out to Josh during this time, but Josh was laying pretty low. And Josh was somebody the family had known for several years, as he'd been dating Kierra for 5 years. They honestly thought that he was probably laying low because him and Kierra had recently had that falling out, and maybe he was embarrassed to be talking to Kierra's family. But what was going on with Joshua Simmons? There was talk on the street that he was now living with this other woman and that this other woman was pregnant. However, the family, Kierra's family, didn't suspect Josh in any involvement in Kierra's disappearance. And they felt they knew him pretty well and they trusted him. Law enforcement did move forward with entering her case in the missing persons database, but it was labeled as a non-suspicious missing person, so not a lot of attention was put on the case right away. The United States Postal Service does launch their own investigation and offer up reward money for Kierra, as does the National Association of Letter Carriers. Now, as investigators haven't turned up many clues, The one thing that they do have is this surveillance footage. So investigators and family really analyze and look at this CCTV that they have of Kierra. And one thing that Kierra's mom's boyfriend noted, Dan Perkins, is that he thinks she's walking away from her home, but for some reason she passes her car and then suddenly turns and looks as if somebody may have called to her off camera. And she turns quickly and starts walking in the other direction. And because of this, the footage is picked up on even more and more media outlets as they talk about these strange actions in this surveillance. And of course, more experts weigh in on what is possibly happening. And in fact, this video becomes sort of the cornerstone of the story. Kierra's family also wants to analyze her phone to see if she had been talking or making plans with anyone. But since she was listed as a non-suspicious disappearance, they can't get a warrant for phone records, and they can't unlock her phone or figure out her passcode to look through it themselves. So the investigation kind of hits a wall at this point. No signs of Kierra are discovered, no sightings are reported, and there is just no trail to follow. But a big twist in the story comes several months later when Karen announces that they have confirmed that the woman in the surveillance footage was not Kierra. Not only was everyone shocked to hear this after seeing this footage over and over and analyzing it in depth so much, but Karen also said that they realized this several months ago, and police asked them not to reveal to the public that it wasn't Kierra. They advised her to continue and let the public believe that it was her in that video. And the family did indeed keep quiet for a while, but after so many months, Karen felt it wasn't doing any good, and the police haven't brought her any answers yet, so she admits that all the time and energy focused on that video was irrelevant and does speak out to the media about that. So where does all of this leave the investigation? We know that Kierra was actually last seen on Tuesday, October 2nd, as she left her friend's house and went to her WIC appointment. We know she spoke to her mom on the phone on her way to that appointment. Nobody reports seeing or hearing from her after that. Her car, phone, and purse were left behind right in front of her home. Her boyfriend Josh isn't talking, but police don't name him as a person of interest either. The family continues to beg for help and beg anybody to come forward with any kind of information they have. In order to help in the search for Kierra, her father quit his job up in Wisconsin and moved to Chicago. For a while, he was actually living out of his car, which was parked right outside of his daughter's home. He said he would not leave until she was found. He spent his days and nights handing out flyers across Chicago and was very outspoken about the case, both online and to media outlets. He's also spent weeks looking through abandoned buildings in the belief that Kierra might be held someplace against her will. In the months after her disappearance, investigators searched areas in and around Chicago. In November of 2018, a search was conducted in the Whistler Woods Forest Preserve in Riverdale, after tips came in suggesting the area might be of some importance to the case. A couple of bones were located and taken by area detectives. However, it has not been revealed if they belong to a human or if they are animal remains. And since nothing more had ever been stated about these, my belief is they just had nothing to do with the case. A large reward fund was set up in the hopes of enticing those with information to come forward. The USPS Inspection Service offered up $25,000, while the National Association of Letter Carriers provided another $2,500. By 2020, that amount had risen to nearly $50,000 as a Chicago-based activist and a private company also contributed funds. In January of 2020, Kierra's father Joseph held a meeting at the George Bray YMCA in Racine, Wisconsin. He announced that he is of the belief that Kierra is still alive and being held captive in a vacant home, and he feels the police could have done more to solve this case. Throughout the investigation, the Chicago Police Department remained tight-lipped regarding details, which definitely made it frustrating for the public and even for the media. But we also know the police sometimes have a method to their madness and have to keep some things under wraps. What they would eventually come out and say is that they feel they know what transpired, and it's just a matter of finding the evidence to corroborate what they suspect. They have also now shared that they have a minimum of 2, maybe 3 persons of interest who were the last to see Kierra before she disappeared. But they have not revealed much about them, other than to say one was an acquaintance of the missing woman. So with all that being said, there are no clues available to the public, but that doesn't stop people from having theories. So let's talk about these theories. Number 1, Joshua Simmons. Let's get this one out of the way because I know what most of you are thinking, the boyfriend. And there are lots to lead us to believe this might be the case. He was cheating on Kierra. He had another woman who was also pregnant. He didn't help in the search for Kierra, and he would actually eventually move out of state. It seems to be the popular opinion of the public that Joshua and his girlfriend are responsible for Kierra's disappearance. Theory number 2. Kierra walked away. This is always a possible theory in missing persons cases, especially those of adults. But nothing in Kierra's life leads anyone to think this might be the case. Even if she had learned of Josh's infidelity and was distraught, she would most likely have turned to her family for support, not just walked away. Theory number 3, Dan Perkins. Dan Perkins was Kierra's mother's boyfriend at the time. And this theory is floating around out there that he had something to do with Kierra. And I mention that because it does come up in several publications. But I can't find any real evidence to substantiate these claims. Theory number 4, gang violence. Locals have said that the south side of Chicago has a long history of gang violence. Did Kierra meet with foul play? Was she in the wrong place at the wrong time? Or was she maybe involved in something that no one else knew about? So what on earth happened to Kierra Coles? This is one of those cases that is so close to being solved. The case of Kierra Coles needs to be talked about, and people need to push for answers. Kierra Coles vanished in October of 2018. She was 3 months pregnant. Kierra is described as a black female, 5 foot 4 inches tall and weighing about 125 pounds at the time she disappeared. She has several tattoos, including a heart on her left hand, the phrase Lucky Libra on her back, and a jaguar's head on the back of her shoulder. If you have any information as to the whereabouts of Kierra Coles, please contact the Chicago Police Department at 312-747-5789 or the United States Postal Inspection Service at 877-876-2455. So what do you think happened to Kierra Coles? Thank you so much for listening to Kierra's story. I know it's a bit frustrating with the lack of clues to work with, but Kierra Coles and her unborn baby are still missing and deserve to be found. Her family continues to this day to search for answers. As a reminder, make sure you are following us on Facebook and Instagram, and we will be back again next week with another Unsolved Missing Persons episode, and of course, a bonus episode this Friday over on Patreon. If you have a case suggestion for us, we want to hear about it. Send me an email at canwefindthem@gmail.com. Please share Kierra's name and her story. Law enforcement just needs that missing piece of evidence to close this case. Thank you all again for listening to this episode of Where Are They? We will be back again next week, and until then, stay safe and hug your loved ones.